So let's get to Julian Assange. Let's get to our final story about Julian and what's happening now in Australia. We have seen pressure, a little bit of pressure, maybe not a lot of pressure, but a little bit of pressure, a little bit of pressure on the US government to resolve this matter. That's how they put it, resolve this matter, end this case, and free Julian Assange. And there were these talks, diplomatic talks, mostly about the military relations between Australia and the United States, all about what Australia can do for the United States to help them saber rattle against China in the Asia Pacific region. So everything that you expect from this warmongering, war making state. And during a press conference after these talks between ministers and some of the diplomatic officials from the US, you had Antony Blinken address the discussion that I presume happened at some point during during the meeting, someone from Australia reminded Blinken that they think that the Assange case should end. But it was at least discussed during this press conference if it didn't happen in private. And so I think this is Penny Wong, and Penny Wong, Australian official, she is taking this first question, or she answers the question first, and then Antony Blinken comes in, Secretary of State, to respond. And so we'll put this on the screen here, and we'll watch this clip, and I'll comment on it, and then we'll wrap up the show. But this goes to the this is part of us wondering what's going to happen next with Julian Assange. Extradition could be imminent at any moment. So, there's Lloyd Austin. He's the Pentagon secretary or chief. He was there in Australia as well.
The question in relation to Mr. Assange, I have answered this question, I think, probably also from you, Matthew, on a number of occasions. And I would make 3 points. The first is we have made clear our view that Mr. Assange's case has dragged on for too long, and our desire that it be brought to a conclusion. And we've said that publicly, and you would anticipate that that reflects also the position we articulate in private. I've also said that obviously that we do what we can, government to government, but there are limits until Mr. Assange's legal processes have concluded. And there's a footnote I would make this point that the case you reference had got to a different point in terms of legal proceedings. And my final point is that I understand Mr. Assange has filed a renewal of appeal application in the UK. The Australian government is not party to these legal proceedings, and nor can we intervene with them. Having said that, we will continue to offer him consular assistance and to convey our expectations about his treatment.
There is a kind of backhanded nature to the way they talk about their support for Assange, or maybe underhanded is better. Uh, Julian Assange filed an appeal. It was actually a while ago that he sought an appeal, but in the way that she addresses the question, it almost seems like Assange is prolonging this, and any suffering, he's to blame for it because he is appealing within the UK courts, and then they say that Australia isn't party to the proceedings, like they can't do anything. I mean, look, any Australian official that wanted to join in the appeal and put forward anything to a judge to make their objections known as to why Julian Assange should be freed, I have to imagine that that would carry some weight for the High Court in the UK. And so certainly, I think it's good that they are raising the issue. They take the position that they would like this to end, but it's a kind of ambiguous position because they don't really say how they want the US government to end the case. It could end by dropping the charges. It could also end by Julian Assange pleading guilty. Well, what do they think Julian Assange should say he was guilty of committing? What do they think is reasonable about the charges in the case that has been brought against him? Or is this just a compromise of a client state? because that's what it looks like. It looks like an admission that we can't get the US to drop the charges entirely. We can't get them to accept an outcome where Julian Assange is not found guilty of some offense. So we'll just say that they should do a deal with him and find a way to end this where he doesn't go to trial. But then they also say that if there are legal proceedings, there's nothing that Australia can do. And they talk about this consular assistance. I think we should be careful about how we approach that, because some of that hasn't always been as good as it could be when Julian Assange needed somebody to look into how he was doing at the Belmarsh High Security Prison. And sometimes there have been issues with access to people who he would like to meet with. Uh, you should recall that the Belmarsh prison actually denied access to people from Reporters Without Borders who wanted to come and have a discussion with him. That same day, someone from Australia was allowed access to Assange, but the people who had been cleared for a visit to the prison, they were denied access. So, what is this obstruction that the prison has engaged in, making it difficult for Assange to put together a defense? And what does the Australia government also think about pressuring journalists that could be in UK, in Australia, to become witnesses that can help facilitate this trial? What do they think about that if they claim to support press freedom? Let's get to Blinken. And Blinken's answer is much more of an issue than anything from Australia.
Um, Look, as a general matter, policy, we don't really comment on extradition matters, extradition proceedings. And so I really would refer you to our Department of Justice for any questions about the status of the criminal case. So with Mr. Assange or the other person in question. And I really do understand and can certainly confirm what Penny said about the fact that this matter was raised with us as it has been in the past. And I understand the sensitivities. I understand the concerns and views of Australians. I think it's very important that our friends here understand our concerns about this matter. And what our Department of Justice has already said repeatedly, publicly, is this. Mr. Assange was charged with very serious criminal conduct in the United States in connection with his alleged role in one of the largest compromises of classified information in the history of our country. The actions that he is alleged to have committed risked very serious harm to our national security, to the benefit of our adversaries, and put named human sources at grave risk of physical harm, grave risk of detention. So I say that only because just as we understand sensitivities here, it's important that our friends understand sensitivities in the United States.
Let's go through the many reasons why that's a bullshit answer. And it's probably apparent to you. But first off, the idea that the State Department does not weigh in on matters of extradition and that would only be something for the Justice Department to react to and speak about is false. Because in the extradition case, when the US government had lost at the appeal stage before the High Court of Justice, this was during 2021. So now a couple years ago, there was a diplomatic note that was entered and submitted to the Foreign Office in the UK by the State Department, which had what you might have heard as diplomatic assurances. These diplomatic assurances about how Julian Assange would be treated and handled by the US government if he was in custody, how he would not be put in a supermax prison, how he would have some type of access to mental health care, how he would have some ability to request a transfer to serve a prison sentence in Australia because of a treaty, if he would like to avail himself of that process. And so they did that, and they put their thumb on the scale, and they got that into the court, and the justices there gave all of this all of these claims from the State Department more weight than many of the things that had been raised in district court at the lower level when the US had lost, because they did nothing to diminish the concerns. They didn't, as they were raised by Julian Assange's legal team, they never put anything forward to rebut these statements about solitary confinement and how people are abused in the US prison system. And so then finally, now they were on the losing side, they called in the support of the State Department, which spoke about the extradition matter. And, obviously they weren't weighing in on the criminal charges, but they were interfering in it rather than just letting the process play out. So it is not true that they don't have any role to play in extradition matters. The State Department absolutely can play a role in the outcome of an extradition request. And so there you hear them talking about these sensitivities. Well, Australia has sensitivities, but we have sensitivities too. It's a bit like hoity-toity, and it's as if Australia isn't already thinking about those sensitivities, as he puts them. Obviously, they know. That's why Australia is so timid. That's why they won't demand a drop, that the charges be dropped. That's why they act the way that they do. That's why they tiptoe when it comes to their requests to respect the human rights of an Australian citizen that is being held as a political prisoner in a case widely and globally condemned by civil liberties and human rights organizations. So, what he said, you'll notice that he read from a sheet. This is what they had to read back on World Press Freedom Day. So, here we go. There I've got this exchange. I'm going to play it again for you. And it's incredible to me that they haven't been able to come up with anything more than what they're reading the script. Come on. If you're going to try and spin us, Antony Blinken, at least do a little bit of work here. It's been 3 months. What your State Department said back then was bullshit. Now you need to come up with some more bullshit now, because what you're saying, it hasn't changed anything. It hasn't reassured anyone. People are still on you about how the US government does not support freedom of the press. So look at this and hear this exchange that took place back on World Press Freedom Day. You might have seen this already, but let's bring it back in here, because here's the State Department, again, being asked about Julian Assange.
The State Department thinks that Mr. Assange has been charged with serious criminal conduct in the United States in connection with his alleged role in one of the largest compromises of classified information in our nation's history. His actions risked serious harm to U.S. national security, to the benefit of our adversaries. It put named human sources to grave and imminent risk, and risk of serious physical harm and arbitrary detention. So it does not matter how we categorize any person, but this is we view this as something he's been charged with serious criminal conduct.
Well, but it does matter, actually, and that's my question. Do you believe that he's a journalist or not?
Matt, I'm just not going to offer a prescriptive assessment from here. Our view on Mr. Assange, our view on Mr. Assange is that he's been charged with serious criminal conduct in the United States.
Charged with anything, Evan Gershkovich has been charged with a serious criminal offense in Russia, and you say that he's a journalist, and he is, obviously. And I just want to know whether or not you the State Department, regardless of any charges that he faces, believe that he is a journalist or he is something else?
Well, first, I would say, Matt, that these two cases are very,
Of
very
course, they're
different.
completely different, but
The United States doesn't go around arbitrarily detaining people, and the judicial oversight and checks and balances that we have in our system versus the Russian system are a little bit different. But again, I'm not here to offer a specific assessment. What I will say is that he's been charged with a serious crime, with serious criminal conduct in the United States that has seriously put in harm's way U.S. national security, and that continues to be the case.
Okay, so basically the bottom line is that you don't have an answer. You won't say whether you think
I
he
think
is a journalist or not.
I've sufficiently answered your question, Matt. As I've said, we believe that he has been charged with a serious criminal conduct in the United States.
But not for me. Okay, all right, thank you.
I think the people at Abu Ghraib would have a different opinion about whether the United States goes around arbitrarily detaining people, since they endured torture and abuse, and there were hundreds of people, and then there were thousands upon thousands of people that came through various Iraqi prisons there, and that was at the order and behest of a U.S. military occupation. And then, of course, there was a rendition, detention, and interrogation program, which is a torture program, that had people going through black sites and they were arbitrarily detained. But okay, whatever. If you want to promote this fiction that the country does not arbitrarily detain people, it's just not even believable on its face. But the point of showing that clip was I had actually forgotten about that gem of them just outright saying that the U.S. does not arbitrarily detain people, which is, I love it. So the fact is, as you listen there, what this spokesperson is saying is the same exact thing that Blinken is saying. What an insult to Australia. They already heard this back in May. This is what they heard. You come to Australia, you get asked this question. What you have prepared for their public is a canned answer that some, I don't know, intern wrote for you back in May for World Press Freedom Day. Fuck you. I mean, seriously. So we're owed something more. We are owed something more. People need to demand more from this administration. The way that they go about thinking that they don't have to explain what they're doing and defend it is obnoxious. And U.S. holds itself out as a supporter of freedom and democracy. Committee to Protect Journalists, the Freedom of the Press Foundation, Reporters Without Borders, ACLU, the Center for Constitutional Rights, go down the list. All these organizations around the world. There's organizations in the UK. There's the National Union for Journalists. There's all these different groups. They're speaking out and condemning what has been done. Amnesty International, which needs to declare Julian Assange a prisoner of conscience, like now. Like immediately do it. But in any case, pushing for him to be freed. All of these organizations condemning what the Biden White House has done. They listen to these organizations when they're opposed to abuses, human rights abuses in Russia. They ignore them when they're opposed to Julian Assange's treatment. They are willing to go out and say journalism is not a crime when it comes to Evan Gershkovich. But it remains true. It was true months ago around World Press Freedom Day. It's true now. The State Department should understand that if Russia is not supposed to detain Evan Gershkovich, if it is wrong for him to be in detention, then it is wrong for Julian Assange to be in detention. But if you're okay with Julian Assange being in detention, as it looks like you are, Antony Blinken looks like he doesn't lose any sleep at all over the fact that Julian Assange has been destroyed as a human being, he's being grinded down by the way he has been confined in this national security facility in London. And if that's something that's okay with you, then I suppose we can't really do much. We can't really say that Russia should free Evan Gershkovich, because aren't they just doing what the United States is doing with Julian Assange? And any other Western journalist that gets detained in whatever country because they say that those foreign correspondents are engaged in some act of espionage and seeking to bring down the government. They're trying to uncover details of military operations that are sensitive. And if that's what they say, and that's why they believe they need to detain those Western journalists, isn't it so much harder to convince them that they're wrong when Julian Assange continues to sit in a prison cell and you continue to push for his extradition to be put on trial in Alexandria, Virginia, in the Eastern District, in the same court, by the way, where Abu Ghraib torture survivors are pursuing a lawsuit against this private military contractor. Hey, you made it to the end of this clip and you made it through all those ad breaks that we crammed into the video. So thank you for watching and thank you for your interest in this channel. Please consider becoming a member to support the independent journalism that we do on whistleblowers, Julian Assange's case, secrecy and press freedom related issues. As a member, you get access to not only the full broadcast that included this clip, but you also will get access to broadcasts of the end of week movie show that I do, as well as the bi-weekly show that I host with Rania Khalek, Unauthorized Disclosure, that has been long running for nearly 10 years. And by being a member, you make it possible to do this work on a regular basis. So thank you for your interest in the channel, and we'll see you again soon.